Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our evening program. My name is Dawn. Now, America was never a country founded on a racial or ethnic identity. It is a country that was founded on ideas of liberty, justice, and freedom. The liberty at the time of George Washington was not a concept that most people thought applied to the common man. In April of 1775, a group of American farmers, those common peasants, opened fire on the regular troops of the British Army. The dispute between taxation and representation had dissolved into war, a war over that very idea, that concept of liberty. Now, it must have seemed foolhardy to the common bystanders for a group of colonials, untrained, unorganized, without any regular access to arms or ammunition, to take on the world's most powerful country in open warfare. Now, George Washington issued this declaration to his troops. The time is now at hand, which must probably determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves. The fate of the unborn millions will now depend under God on the conduct of this army. Let us therefore animate and encourage each other and show the whole world that a free man contending for liberty on his own ground is superior to any slavish mercenary on earth. And prevail they did. America has now become something new, something never done before. It was the great experiment. Years after the war, in a letter to Thomas Jefferson, George Washington writes, "The rights of mankind, the privileges of the people, and the true principles of liberty seem to have been more generally discussed and better understood throughout Europe since the American Revolution than they were at any former period." In that storm of revolution, a five-man committee met to take care of some minor administrative details. The drafting of a document announcing America's independence to the world. But the obvious choice to write that document, Benjamin Franklin, refused. So the committee then chose another man, one that was slightly idealistic, but was both from Virginia and far less well known than any of the other members of that committee. But the first two paragraphs of that inconsequential document become the most important 55 words in American history. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thomas Jefferson considered writing the Declaration of Independence to be his greatest achievement. But Jefferson's ideals would not even be realized until years later when another president, Abraham Lincoln, faced his greatest challenge. Abraham Lincoln said, "All honor to Jefferson, to the man who, in the concrete pressure of the struggle for national independence by a single people, had the coolness, forecast, and capacity to introduce into a merely revolutionary document an abstract truth, and so embalm it there, that today and in all coming days it shall be a rebuke and a stumbling block to the very harbingers of reappearing tyranny and oppression." A mere 44 days after being elected president, Abraham Lincoln faced war. A war, again, over that word, that concept of liberty. Long ago, George Washington had warned, unfortunately, the nature of man is such that the experiences of others are not attended to as they ought to be. We must feel ourselves before we can think or perceive the danger which threatens, and that danger had come. As Lincoln said, the world has never had a good definition of the word liberty, and the American people just now are much in want of one. We all declare for liberty, but in using the same word, we do not all mean the same thing. The shepherd drives the wolf from the sheep's throat, for which the sheep thinks the shepherd is a liberator, while the wolf denounces him for the same act as a destroyer of liberty, especially as the sheep was a black one. Plainly, the sheep and the wolf are not agreed upon a definition of the word liberty. Men fought and died to decide which definition of that word, that abstract truth, would define America. Roosevelt was just 5 years old when he watched the funeral procession for Abraham Lincoln from the window of his apartment building. Theodore Roosevelt greatly admired Lincoln, who, in trying to purge slavery from the nation, changed the meaning of liberty for America. Abraham Lincoln changed the relationship between the people and the government. It is now Roosevelt's task to change the relationship between the people, the government, and big business. As president, Roosevelt brought court cases against businesses, broke up large trusts, and signed into law taxes against corporations. He signaled to businesses that they had a responsibility not only to their profits, but to the American people. Roosevelt said, Americanism is a question of principle, of purpose, of idealism or character. It is not a matter of birthplace or creed or line of descent. Roosevelt pushed for laws limiting the long working hours of women and children. He sought better working conditions for factory workers and longer conservationists. He used his power as president to block the misuse of forests, vital waterways, important wildlife areas, and natural wonders. Roosevelt said, we have fallen heir to the most glorious heritage a people can ever receive, and each one must do his part if we wish to show that the nation is worthy of its good fortune. Roosevelt, Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, all 4 of those presidents fought in their time and in their own way to define for themselves and this nation the definition of that word, liberty, in a country that was not founded on a race, but on an idea that was born in struggle, but found the worth the fighting for, seen only as a dream, but written into a document, grown to change the course of history, and then adapted to better serve the people. And it is an idea that must continually be brought forward and renewed, because as Abraham Lincoln said, you must do your own growing, no matter how tall your grandfather was. Welcome, everybody, to the evening program.